What was supposed to be a simple hearing explodes into horror when a pregnant woman is brutally assaulted in front of the cameras by her own husband. The video goes viral, the country rises up, and a judge and mother transforms pain into justice. And when the truth reveals the network of corruption that propped up the abuser, the fall of an empire begins. If you enjoy stories like this, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. The courtroom was unbearably crowded that August morning in London. Marina Caldwell adjusted, her hands over the rounded swell of her 6-month pregnancy, as she waited to be called. The buzz of journalists crammed into the back rows created an almost palpable tension in the air. She knew this would not be an ordinary day. The divorce hearing between her and Raphael Rhodes had gained media attention in recent weeks, ever since the first rumors about irregularities in his company began to circulate. Raphael was sitting 3 chairs ahead, speaking to his lawyer in a low tone, yet audible enough for Marina to catch fragments of his usual arrogance. He wore an impeccable suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, and maintained the posture of someone who had never been contradicted in his life. Marina knew that mask well. During 5 years of marriage, she had learned to decipher every nuance of that face, which society saw as that of a successful businessman, philanthropist, and visionary. But behind the appearances, Marina knew a completely different man. The side door opened and everyone stood. The judge entered with firm steps, her black robes impeccable, her gaze serene yet piercing. Marina felt her heart tighten as she saw the face of her mother, Judge Helena Caldwell, take the main chair. Few people in the room knew of their relationship. Marina had kept her maiden name even after marriage, a decision that at the time seemed merely a matter of professional identity, but which now held a much greater significance. Helena gently tapped the gavel on the desk, calling for silence. Her gaze swept the room with authority before briefly landing on Marina. In that instant, mother and daughter exchanged a look heavy with meaning. Helena quickly averted her eyes, maintaining the impartiality required by her position. The hearing began with the usual formalities. Raphael's lawyer, a portly man with a deep voice named Mr. Harrington, began his argument by trying to paint Marina as a gold-digging wife seeking financial advantage from the divorce. He presented documents, contracts, and bank statements that, according to him, proved Marina had excessively benefited from the union. Marina listened to it all in silence, her hands trembling on her belly. Her lawyer, Mr. Marshall, a younger but extremely competent man, patiently awaited his turn. When he was finally called to speak, he presented a completely different line of argument. Calmly and precisely, he began to deconstruct Raphael's narrative, showing how every financial benefit mentioned by the opposing counsel was, in fact, Marina's legitimate right as a de facto partner in the business, even if she was not officially listed in the company's documents. It was when Mr. Marshall mentioned the security cameras installed in the couple's residence that the atmosphere changed. He revealed that he had obtained through legal means access to the recordings from the last 6 months. The footage, he claimed, showed a disturbing pattern of behavior on Raphael's part. Raphael shot up from his chair, his face red with fury. Mr. Harrington tried to hold him by the arm, but he shrugged him off with a brusque gesture. The entire room fell silent, all eyes on the businessman now walking towards the table where Marina was seated. Marina felt the blood run cold in her veins. She knew that look. It was the same one she saw on nights when he came home late, drunk on power and frustration. It was the look that preceded the humiliations, the cutting words, the screams that echoed through the walls of the mansion where they lived. Raphael stopped in front of her, his fists clenched. The court security officers were already moving, but it all happened too quickly. He pointed a finger at Marina's face, his voice a low, threatening growl. "Do you think you can destroy me? You're nothing without me. Nothing. This child you're carrying, this whole charade, it all ends today." Marina tried to stand, but before she could complete the movement, Raphael grabbed her arm forcefully, his fingers digging into her skin. She felt a sharp pain shoot up her shoulder. And then, in front of everyone, the cameras, the journalists, the lawyers, and the judge, Raphael raised his hand and shoved her violently. Marina lost her balance and fell. backward into her chair, the impact reverberating through her entire body. The silence that followed was absolute. For 2 endless seconds, no one moved. And then chaos erupted. Helena leaped to her feet, the gavel striking the desk with a deafening crack. "Order! Order in this court!" The security officers descended on Raphael, grabbing him by the arms. He was still trying to break free, his face contorted in an expression of uncontrolled rage. The journalists were already on their feet, their cameras recording every second of the surreal scene. Flashes exploded from every direction. Marina was being helped up by Mr. Marshall, who steadied her. She clutched her belly with both hands, her face pale, her eyes welling with tears. But she did not cry. Not there. Not in front of him. Helena descended from the bench with a speed that contradicted her usual serene judicial demeanor. She approached Marina, and for a brief moment the judge disappeared, and only the mother remained. Helena touched her daughter's face, her eyes searching for signs of serious injury. "Are you all right? The baby?" Marina nodded, still in shock. "I'm fine, Mum, I'm fine." Helena took a deep breath, composing herself. She turned to the officers holding Raphael. "This man has just committed contempt of court and physical assault in a live courtroom. I want him taken into custody immediately. He will be detained until a bail hearing can be held to assess the need for pretrial detention." Raphael finally seemed to grasp the gravity of what he had done. His face lost some of its color, his eyes wide. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding. She provoked me. Don't you see? This is all a setup." Helena returned to her seat, the gavel striking again. "Mr. Raphael Rhodes, you are being formally charged with contempt, assault, and disturbing the peace. You have the right to remain silent and will be assisted by your counsel. Take him away." As Raphael was dragged out of the room, shouting protests and empty threats, Helena suspended the hearing. Marina was escorted to a private room where a medical team was already waiting to perform a full evaluation. Mr. Marshall remained by her side, taking meticulous notes of everything that had happened. Outside the courthouse, the news was already spreading like wildfire. The videos captured by the journalists began circulating on social media. Within minutes, the name Raphael Rhodes was a trending topic, and not for the reasons he would have wanted. Inside the private room, Marina finally allowed the tears to flow. They were not tears of fear or physical pain. They were tears of relief. For the first time in 5 years, she no longer had to pretend. She no longer had to smile for the cameras by his side, no longer had to accept his apologies, his empty promises of change. The whole world had seen who Raphael Rhodes really was. Helena entered the room after the doctors had finished their examination and confirmed that Marina and the baby were fine. Mother and daughter embraced in silence, a hug that carried years of kept secrets, of unshared pain, of a love that had always existed but had to be kept in the background because of Marina's marriage. "I'm so sorry, Marina. I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined it was like this." Helena held her daughter's face in her hands. "Why did you never tell me?" Marina closed her eyes, tears still streaming. "Because he made me believe no one would listen, that I was crazy, that I was exaggerating. And because I was ashamed, Mum. Ashamed of having chosen a man like that, of having believed in him." Helena shook her head. "The blame is never on the victim, my daughter, never. And now the world knows that." Mr. Marshall entered the room with a tablet in his hands, his face serious. "Judge Caldwell, Marina, you need to see this. The scene is already on every news channel. Social media is in an uproar, and that's not all. Other reports are starting to surface. Other women who worked at Raphael's company are coming forward, saying he had a history of abusive behavior." Marina looked at the tablet screen. There she was, pregnant and vulnerable, being shoved by Raphael as camera flashes captured every detail. But what caught her attention most were the comments, thousands of them, words of support, of outrage, of solidarity. People she had never met were on her side. Mr. Marshall's phone rang. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and then hung up, his face even graver. "That was Captain Roger Davies, from the Specialized Unit. He wants to speak with us. He said there's important information we need to know about Raphael Rhodes." Marina felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of information? Marshall hesitated. He wouldn't say over the phone, but he said it's related to other investigations that were already underway. It seems Raphael has been under surveillance for some time. Helena exchanged a look with Marina. Daughter, I need to officially recuse myself from this case now. What happened today makes it clear there's a conflict of interest, but I will ensure you have the best legal support possible, and I will be by your side, not as a judge, but as your mother. Marina nodded, wiping her tears. I know, Mom, and I'm ready. For the first time in a long time, I'm truly ready to face all of this. Outside the room, the world kept spinning. The news multiplied, the comments increased, and the empire carefully built by Raphael Rhodes began to show its first cracks. What he had done that August morning was not just an act of violence. It was the beginning of a collapse that would reveal much deeper and darker secrets. Marina held her mother's hand tightly. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer alone. And this time the truth would not be silenced. The next few hours would be crucial. Raphael's bail hearing was set for the following day, and Mr. Marshall was already working on the necessary documents to request an emergency protective order. But there was something bigger happening behind the scenes, something Marina didn't yet fully understand. Captain Roger Davies was no ordinary police officer. He commanded a special unit that investigated corporate crimes and had an impeccable reputation. If he was interested in the Raphael Rhodes case, it was because there was much more at stake than a simple assault in a courtroom. While Marina rested in the private room drinking water and trying to process everything that had happened, Helena and Mr. Marshall went to meet Captain Davies, who was waiting for them in a courthouse meeting room. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, graying hair at the temples, and a penetrating gaze. He had the posture of someone who had seen a lot in life and was not easily shaken. Judge Caldwell, Mr. Marshall, thank you for meeting me so quickly. What happened today has accelerated something that has been in motion for months. Davies opened a folder filled with documents. Raphael Rhodes is not just a businessman with marital problems. He is at the center of a much larger investigation. Helena crossed her arms, her expression serious. What kind of investigation? Davies pulled some photographs from the folder. We started investigating him 6 months ago, after a former employee from his company came to us with serious allegations. She brought documents suggesting financial irregularities, but she also reported a toxic work environment with systematic harassment and intimidation. During our investigation, we discovered something much more concerning. He placed a series of documents on the table. Raphael Rhodes maintained an unauthorized surveillance system inside his own home. The cameras your lawyer mentioned today weren't just for security. He monitored his wife's every move, recorded private conversations, and used that information to psychologically manipulate her. Marshall picked up one of the documents, flipping through it quickly. This is illegal. Recording without consent can constitute several crimes. Davies nodded. Exactly. But there's more. We found evidence that he forced Marina to sign financial documents without her knowing their true content. Contracts, powers of attorney, tax declarations, all forged or obtained under duress. If anything went wrong with the company, Marina would be the first to be held responsible. Helena felt her blood boil. He was setting my daughter up to be his scapegoat. That's exactly it. Raphael Rhodes is extremely calculating. He built a protective network around himself, using those closest to him as shields. The difference is that Marina decided not to accept that situation anymore. Marshall closed the folder, thoughtful. Will what happened in court today be used against him? Davies smiled for the first time. It already is. The assault was recorded by dozens of cameras. It's irrefutable proof. But more importantly, the public outcry will make other people feel safe to speak up. And believe me, there are many people who know things about Raphael Rhodes and were afraid to come forward. Helena took a deep breath. Captain, my daughter is pregnant and has just been through a trauma. I need to know, is she safe? Davies looked directly at Helena. I will personally guarantee her safety. I've already requested a police escort, and we are monitoring all movements related to Raphael. But I need Marina's cooperation. She needs to help us fully understand what was happening inside that house. Helena hesitated. She's fragile. I understand. But the faster we act, the faster we can ensure he no longer poses a threat. Davies closed the folder. And there's one more thing you need to know. The former employee who came to us, Danielle Stevens, has information that could completely change the course of this case. She kept a detailed diary of everything she witnessed while working for Raphael, and what's written in there is shocking. The next morning dawned grey over London. Marina woke up at her mother's house, a comfortable residence in Kensington, a world away from the ostentatious mansion she had shared with Raphael. For the first time in months she had slept without nightmares. Her body still ached from the fall the day before, but the physical pain was infinitely more bearable than the constant anguish she had carried for years. Helena was already in the kitchen, making coffee and sorting through papers spread across the table. She had officially recused herself from the case, but that didn't mean she would stop fighting for her daughter. She would just do it differently from behind the scenes, ensuring every step was taken correctly. Did you sleep well? Helena poured a cup of coffee for Marina, who sat down slowly in a chair. Better than in the last 5 years, Mom. Marina held the cup with both hands, feeling its comforting warmth. The baby moved a lot during the night. I think he's feeling the difference too. Helena smiled, gently touching her daughter's belly. He will be born free, Marina, free from all this weight. Marina's phone vibrated on the table. It was a text from Mr. Marshall, informing her that Raphael's bail hearing would take place at 10 in the morning and that Captain Davies would like to speak with her beforehand. There were also dozens of messages from unknown numbers, some of support, others from journalists requesting interviews. Marina turned off her phone, not yet ready to deal with all the attention. 2 hours later, Marina, Helena, and Mr. Marshall were in a discreet room at the specialized police unit, waiting for Captain Davies. When he entered, he was accompanied by a young woman with brown hair tied in a ponytail, her expression nervous but determined. She clutched a purse to her chest like a shield. Marina, this is Danielle Stevens. Davies made the introductions carefully. Danielle worked as Raphael Rhodes's executive assistant for 3 years. She has important information to share with you. Danielle sat down, her hands trembling slightly. I saw what happened yesterday in court, on television, and I knew I had to come here, that I couldn't stay silent anymore. Marina leaned forward, interested. What do you know about my husband? Danielle took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep water. I know things that could destroy him. Things I witnessed, that I wrote down, that I kept very carefully the entire time I worked there. She opened her purse and took out a worn hardcover notebook. This is my diary. I recorded everything. Every humiliation, every threat, every irregularity I saw. Davies took the diary carefully, flipping through a few pages. Danielle came to us 6 months ago, when she finally managed to leave the company. She was terrified, thinking Raphael would come after her, and for good reason. When he found out she had resigned, he tried to intimidate her in every possible way. Danielle nodded, her eyes welling with tears. He called me personally, saying I had signed non-disclosure agreements, and that if I said anything about the company, he would sue me until I lost everything. But that wasn't all. I started being followed. Strange cars outside my house, silent phone calls in the middle of the night. I was terrified. Marina felt a lump in her throat. She knew those tactics well. Raphael used fear as his primary weapon. He always said he had connections, that he knew important people, that he could destroy anyone who dared to challenge him. Mr. Marshall opened the diary to a marked page. May I read a few excerpts? Danielle nodded. I want you to know everything, Marina. You deserve to know who the man you married is. Marshall began to read aloud. March 15th, 3 years ago, Raphael spent the entire morning yelling at the sales team because the quarterly targets weren't met. He called them all incompetent, said he could replace every one of them in 5 minutes. Later in his office, he called Marina and spoke to her in a completely different tone, sweet and loving. When he hung up, he laughed and said to me, "That's how you keep a woman under control. Never let her see who you really are. Marina closed her eyes, the pain in her chest intensifying. She remembered that day. Raphael had come home with flowers and chocolates, saying he missed her, and she, naive, had believed it was a genuine gesture of love. Marshall turned a few more pages. There's more. Much more. He scanned quickly. Here, Danielle describes how Raphael forced her to falsify financial reports to present to investors. Here, how he installed monitoring software on all employee computers, including access to their webcams and microphones. And here she mentions the black file. Helena leaned forward. Black file? Danielle wiped away the tears that had begun to fall. It's a digital safe that Raphael keeps. He calls it that, the black file. Inside, there's compromising information on dozens of people, businessmen, politicians, journalists, even judges. Photos, videos, documents, everything he's collected over the years using private investigators and hackers. He uses it for blackmail, to get favors, to protect himself. Davies crossed his arms, his face serious. We're already trying to locate this file. If we can get access to it, we can dismantle the entire network of corruption that props up Raphael Rhodes's empire. Marina felt a shiver. He mentioned that file a few times, but always vaguely. I thought he was exaggerating, trying to seem more powerful than he really was. It wasn't an exaggeration, Danielle said, opening to another page in her diary. I saw the file once. He was showing it to a businessman who was trying to report him for unethical practices. Raphael opened his laptop, showed photos of the man with his mistress, tax evasion documents, private conversations. The man left the room white as a sheet and never said another word. Marshall made quick notes. This is enough material for a dozen different lawsuits. Blackmail, invasion of privacy, extortion. But there's a problem, Davies said, standing and walking to the window. Raphael is extremely careful. This file is encrypted, hidden on servers that could be anywhere in the world, and he certainly has a contingency plan in case he's arrested. He could program the file to be released publicly, destroying the reputations of dozens of people at once. Helena frowned. It's like a time bomb. Exactly. That's why we need to proceed with extreme caution. Davies returned to the table. Marina, do you have any idea where Raphael might have hidden passwords, access codes, anything related to this file? Marina thought for a moment, mentally retracing every corner of the mansion that had been her home. He had a private office on the second floor. No one was allowed in there, not even the cleaning staff. He said it was for confidential company documents. We need a search and seizure warrant for that house, Mr. Marshall said, looking at Davies. Can you arrange it? It's already in motion. With yesterday's assault and the evidence Danielle has provided, the judge won't deny it. Davies checked his watch. The bail hearing is in an hour. You need to be there. The courthouse was even more crowded than the day before. The news of the assault had spread like gunpowder, and now the entire country was following the case. Marina entered through a side door to avoid the throng of journalists, but even so, she could feel the weight of all those eyes, all those expectations. Raphael was brought in handcuffed, still wearing the suit from the previous day, now wrinkled and stained. He did not look at Marina. He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, his jaw tight. Mr. Harrington stood beside him, visibly uncomfortable with the whole situation. The judge presiding over the bail hearing was Judge August Fisher, a middle-aged man known for his strictness and impartiality. He reviewed the documents carefully before speaking. Mr. Raphael Rhodes, you are accused of contempt of court and physical assault. The images of the incident are clear and unequivocal. Furthermore, information regarding other possible irregularities that are under investigation has come to the attention of this court. He paused, looking directly at Raphael. Considering the gravity of the facts, the public repercussion of the case, and the risk that the accused may attempt to intimidate witnesses or destroy evidence, I hereby order the continuation of pretrial detention until the final judgment. Raphael stood up abruptly. This is absurd. I have rights. I'm a respected businessman. I'm not going to be locked up like a common criminal. The judge banged his gavel. You will have all your rights respected, including the right to a fair trial. But at this moment, detention is necessary. Next. Mr. Harrington tried to argue. But the judge had already made his decision. Raphael was led back to his cell, shouting threats and accusations. Marina watched it all with a mixture of relief and apprehension. On one hand, knowing he was in jail brought a sense of security. On the other, she knew Raphael well enough to know he wouldn't accept this peacefully. Upon leaving the courthouse, Mr. Marshall received an urgent call. It was from one of the investigators working with Captain Davies. They had obtained the search warrant and were already at Raphael's mansion, and they had found something important. An hour later, Marina was back at the police station, this time accompanied not only by Helena and Marshall, but also by Danielle, who had stayed nearby in case she was needed to identify anything. Davies was waiting for them in his office, surrounded by boxes and plastic bags full of evidence. We found much more than we expected. Davies placed a laptop on the table. Raphael's private office was practically a bunker. It had an armored door with a biometric lock, but we gained access. Inside there were 3 computers, dozens of flash drives, external hard drives, and this. He pointed to a small, already opened safe that contained stacks of documents and more flash drives. Marina approached, immediately recognizing some of the papers. Those are the contracts he made me sign. I remember some of them. He said they were routine documents, powers of attorney to facilitate banking matters. Marshall picked up one of the contracts, analyzing it carefully. This makes you a joint partner in the company's debts. If the company goes bankrupt, creditors can come after your personal assets. You signed this? Marina nodded, her voice trembling. He said it was just a formality, that the company was fine, and there would never be a problem. It's a classic trap, Davies said, showing other documents. And there's more. We found fake contracts, fraudulent invoices, and what appears to be a complete system for laundering funds through shell companies. Danielle picked up one of the flash drives. I recognized these. Raphael always carried flash drives in his pocket. He said they were company backups, but I always suspected there was more to it. Davies connected one of the flash drives to the laptop. The screen displayed a complex folder structure, each with a coded name. He clicked on a random folder, and a series of photos and documents appeared, all compromising, all involving well-known people in delicate situations. It's the black file, Davies said, quickly shutting down the laptop. This is sensitive material. We need a specialized digital forensics team to analyze everything carefully. But one thing is certain. Raphael Rhodes built an empire based on fear and blackmail. Marina sat down, processing all this information. For 5 years, she had lived beside this man without truly knowing him, or worse, without wanting to see who he really was. The small red flags she had ignored, the warning signs she chose not to see, were all now exploding in her face in a brutal and unavoidable way. Marina's phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, but something made her press the green button. Marina Caldwell. A distorted male voice came from the other end. You don't know who you're messing with. Raphael has friends, people who won't let this go. If you know what's good for you and that baby, you'll drop all the charges. The call ended before Marina could reply. She stood there, the phone trembling in her hand. Davies immediately took the device from her, checking the number. I'll trace this call, and I'm increasing the security around you. He looked at Helena. Judge, I suggest Marina stays in a safe location until we can identify who is making these threats. Helena agreed, hugging her daughter, who was now visibly shaking. Marina, let's leave London for a few days. I have a house in the Cotswolds. We can stay there while things calm down. But Marina shook her head, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. No, Mom, I'm not going to hide. I spent 5 years of my life hiding, pretending everything was fine, accepting scraps of respect. Enough. If Raphael has friends willing to threaten me, then let them come. But I will not back down. Davies smiled for the first time. I like that determination, but we'll still maintain police protection. And I want you to tell me everything, absolutely everything you remember about Raphael, about the people who frequented your house, about conversations you overheard. Any detail could be important, Marina agreed. I'll tell you everything, every minute, every second of those 5 years. If it's a war he wants, then he'll get one. But this time, the truth is on my side. Danielle approached, gently touching Marina's shoulder. "You're not alone. I'll testify. I'll hand over everything I have. And I bet there are other people who are just waiting for an opportunity to do the same." And Danielle was right. Over the next few hours, the police station began to receive calls and emails from former employees of Raphael's company, from suppliers who had been wronged, from people who had information but had been too afraid to come forward until now. Raphael's arrest and the media coverage of the case had opened the floodgates, and now a river of allegations began to flow. Davies coordinated everything with military efficiency, organizing teams to hear each testimony, analyze each document, verify each piece of information. The investigation that had started as a case of domestic assault was transforming into something much larger, an operation that could dismantle an entire network of corporate corruption. Marina watched it all with a mixture of admiration and astonishment. She had imagined, in her darkest moments, that one day she might find the courage to separate from Raphael, but she never imagined that her decision to file for divorce would trigger a cascade of events of this magnitude. As the sun set over London, casting long shadows across the city, Marina allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope. That the truth would indeed prevail. Hope that her child would be born into a more just world. Hope that, in the end, good would triumph over evil. But she didn't yet know that the coming days would bring even more shocking revelations, testing her strength in ways she couldn't even imagine. The battle was just beginning, and Raphael Rhodes, even from behind bars, still had cards up his sleeve that could completely change the game. The following week brought developments that no one could have foreseen. Raphael Rhodes, even while imprisoned, proved that his reach extended far beyond the prison walls. On Monday morning, the major newspapers ran bombshell headlines. "Wife of jailed tycoon allegedly embezzled millions from company," said one. "Documents reveal fraud scheme led by Marina Caldwell," claimed another. Marina woke up to dozens of missed calls. Mr. Marshall was already at Helena's house, his face grim. Several newspapers spread across the living room table. "We need to talk. Urgently." Marina came downstairs, still in her nightgown, her heart racing. "What's happening?" "Raphael has counterattacked," Marshall said, pointing to the newspapers. "He managed, through his lawyer, to release documents that supposedly prove you embezzled funds from the company. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, fake receipts, doctored contracts, all with your signature." Marina picked up one of the newspapers, her hands shaking. "This is a lie. I never did any of this. These signatures don't even look like mine." Helena entered the room, already dressed formally, her phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking to someone in a firm, authoritative tone. When she hung up, she turned to them. "That was Captain Davies. He's already aware of the situation and is mobilizing forensic document examiners to analyze this supposed evidence. The good news is he believes they are crude forgeries." "But the damage is already done," Marina said, sitting down heavily on the sofa. "People will believe it. They always believe the first version they hear." "Not everyone," Marshall said, sitting beside her. "We have something Raphael doesn't. The truth. And we have Danielle, who can confirm that these practices were common at the company. Raphael always forged documents and used digitized signatures to create fake contracts." Marina's phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from an unknown number, just a short, chilling text. "You should have kept quiet. Now you'll see what happens when you mess with things you shouldn't." Marina showed the message to the others. Davies arrived half an hour later, accompanied by 2 agents. He examined the message and immediately arranged for it to be traced. "We'll find out who's sending these threats, but until then, Marina, you need to be extra careful." The situation grew even more complex when that afternoon a press conference was called by Mr. Harrington. Raphael, through his lawyer, was releasing his version of events. The lawyer claimed that Raphael was the victim of a setup, orchestrated by Marina and Helena, who had allegedly taken advantage of a moment of emotional distress to unjustly frame him. Marina watched the press conference on television, each word feeling like a stab. Raphael was playing dirty, using the exact tactics he always had, distorting reality, playing the victim, and attacking the character of his accuser. But Raphael's strategy was about to spectacularly backfire. That same evening, Davies called an emergency meeting. When Marina, Helena, and Marshall arrived at the station, they found the room filled with technicians analyzing documents and computers. "We have news," Davies said, holding up a report. "The documents released by Raphael are forgeries. The experts have confirmed it. The signatures were scanned and digitally inserted into the documents. Furthermore, we've traced the origin of the supposed bank transfers to offshore accounts. They originate from computers within Raphael's own company, not from your personal device, Marina." Marina felt an immense wave of relief wash over her. "So I can prove my innocence?" "Better than that," Davies said, opening a laptop. "We've gained access to part of Raphael's black file, and what we found is explosive." He turned the screen so everyone could see. Raphael kept detailed records of all his illegal operations. It's as if he created a dossier against himself, probably to use as a bargaining chip if he ever got caught. Marshall leaned in to get a better look. "Is this evidence admissible in court?" "That depends on how it was obtained," Davies hesitated. "And here we have a problem. Some of this information came from an anonymous source, someone inside Raphael's organization who decided to turn everything over." Helena frowned. "That could be considered illegally obtained evidence." Davies nodded gravely. "That's exactly the dilemma we're facing. We have concrete evidence of dozens of crimes, but if it was obtained improperly, it could be thrown out. We're working on finding legal ways to reach the same conclusions." Just then, Danielle, who had been in another room giving another statement, rushed in. "Captain Davies, you need to see this." She held out her phone, her hands shaking. "A friend who still works at the company sent me a message. The board of directors has called an emergency meeting. They're discussing removing Raphael from the presidency." The news spread quickly. Within hours, major business websites were reporting that Rhodes Enterprises was in an institutional crisis. The board, pressured by investors and the negative backlash from the case, had decided to suspend Raphael from all his executive duties until his legal situation was resolved. But the revelations were only just beginning. As investigators delved deeper into the company's structure, they discovered something even more disturbing: an entire department dedicated to what Raphael called strategic security. In practice, it was an operation of corporate espionage and intimidation. The man in charge of this department was named Marcus Andrews, a former police officer who had been dismissed from the force years ago for misconduct. Davies knew him well and knew he was unscrupulous. When the police went to the company to question him, they discovered that Marcus had fled, taking equipment and possibly copies of sensitive files with him. "He knows too much," Davies said, organizing search teams. "And if he's on the run, it means he could be taking orders to do something. We need to find him before it's too late." That night, Marina received another anonymous call. This time, the voice was different, deeper, more threatening. "You're making this very difficult, Marina. Raphael wants to make a deal. Drop the charges, sign the divorce papers without asking for anything, and this all goes away. Otherwise, people could get hurt." Marina, now with police officers on duty at Helena's house, recorded the call as instructed by Davies. When she played the recording for him, the captain pursed his lips. "That voice sounds like Marcus Andrews. We're on the right track." The investigations intensified. Former employees of the company started coming forward, one after another, each with stories of abuse and irregularities. A former HR manager reported being forced to create dossiers on employees, investigating their personal lives to find weaknesses that could be used as tools of control. A former accountant revealed that Raphael maintained 2 sets of books, one official presented to regulatory bodies and another real one, which showed the company's true cash flow, including illegal transactions. Each testimony, each document, each recording that emerged painted an ever darker picture. Raphael Rhodes was not just an abusive husband. He was the center of a complex operation of manipulation, fraud, and intimidation that had operated in the shadows for years. Marina found herself in the eye of a hurricane. From a victim of domestic violence, she had become the key player in an investigation that could bring down dozens of people. The pressure was immense, but with each passing day she felt stronger. The support of her mother, the dedication of Marshall, the protection of Davies, and the courage of Danielle created a support network that kept her steady. It was during one of these turbulent weeks that Marina received an unexpected visitor. An elegant, middle-aged woman appeared at the door of Helena's house. Her name was Beatrice Allen, and she introduced herself as Raphael's first wife. "I saw what happened in court," Beatrice said, seated in the living room, her hands folded in her lap. "And I need to tell my story. I need you to know that you are not alone." Marina looked at the woman, seeing in her a reflection of herself. "What did he do to you?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "We were married for 8 years. In the beginning, everything was perfect. Raphael was charming, attentive, he seemed like the ideal man. But slowly things changed. It started with subtle criticisms, then isolation from my friends and family, and eventually it escalated to psychological violence. He never hit me, but his words were like punches." Helena served tea to them both. "Why did you never report him?" Beatrice smiled sadly. "Because he made me believe I was crazy, that I was exaggerating, that no one would believe me. And because when I tried to leave, he threatened to destroy my professional reputation. I was an architect, working on major projects. Raphael said that if I left him, he would use his connections to ensure I never got another project in the city." "And you believed him?" Marina asked softly. "I believed him because I saw him do it to other people. I saw businessmen who challenged him lose major contracts. I saw employees who confronted him get fired and slandered. Raphael had power, and he wasn't afraid to use it." "But you did leave eventually. How?" Beatrice looked out the window, as if reliving distant memories. "I had a nervous breakdown. I was hospitalized for 2 weeks, and there, away from him, with the help of psychologists and psychiatrists, I was finally able to see the situation clearly. When I was discharged, I went straight to a lawyer and filed for divorce. Raphael tried to fight it, but I had medical documentation proving my mental state, and my lawyer threatened to make everything public. He eventually agreed to the divorce, in exchange for my silence." "And you stayed silent?" Marina questioned. Beatrice nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes. For 10 years I stayed silent. I built a new life, remarried, had children. I tried to forget. But when I saw you in court, pregnant, being assaulted by him, I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. You are brave, Marina. Braver than I was." Marina took Beatrice's hand. "You're here now. That's what matters. Will you testify?" "I will, and I'll bring everything I have. Old emails, messages, divorce documents, anything that can help prove who Raphael really is." Beatrice's testimony was devastating. She described years of psychological manipulation, financial control, and social isolation. Most importantly, she was able to prove, through old medical records and testimonies from therapists who had treated her at the time, that Raphael had a long-standing pattern of abusive behavior. Raphael's defense tried to discredit Beatrice, claiming she was a resentful ex-wife seeking revenge. But the sheer volume of evidence and the consistency of the accounts made it impossible to ignore her words. Meanwhile, the investigation into the Strategic Security Department revealed increasingly disturbing details. The police discovered that Raphael not only spied on Marina, but also had complete dossiers on members of the company's board of directors, on competitors, and on journalists covering the corporate sector. He had built a system of surveillance and control that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. One of the most shocking discoveries was a set of recordings made inside Marina and Raphael's own home. Hidden cameras had been installed in almost every room, including the bedroom and bathroom. The recordings showed intimate moments, private conversations, and moments of Marina's vulnerability that she never imagined were being recorded. When Davies showed Marina the extent of the surveillance, she felt a wave of nausea. "He was watching me the whole time, this entire time." Helena hugged her daughter, her own anger evident on her face. "This is a criminal level of privacy violation. Every one of these cameras, every one of these recordings, is more evidence against him." But the ethical dilemma remained. some of the most incriminating evidence against Raphael had been obtained through the anonymous leak, potentially illegally. Helena, who had been a judge for decades, knew the limits of the law well. As a mother, she wanted to see Raphael punished to the fullest extent. As a retired but still deeply committed jurist, she knew she could not compromise the integrity of the process. One night, sitting in her home office, Helena wrote a letter to the judge presiding over the case. In it, she detailed her concerns about the irregularly obtained evidence and requested that it be discarded, even knowing this could weaken the case against Raphael. It was a painful but necessary decision. Justice had to be done the right way, or it wouldn't be true justice. When Marina learned of her mother's decision, she was initially upset. But after a long conversation, she understood. "We can't become like him, Marina. We can't break the law to punish him for breaking the law. We have to be better than that." And they were. With the support of Davies and Marshall, they focused on the evidence that had been obtained legally: the testimonies, the documents seized with a warrant, the courtroom camera footage, the medical records, the technical expert reports. It was an immense volume of material, enough to sustain multiple charges. The company's board of directors, finally having full access to the extent of Raphael's wrongdoings, voted for his permanent removal from the presidency. The company would be restructured, with new leadership, a new name, a new direction. The empire Raphael had built was crumbling, brick by brick. Marina, now 8 months pregnant, prepared for the final trial. Her lawyer had built a solid case, with dozens of witnesses ready to testify, hundreds of supporting documents and detailed expert reports. The truth was on their side, and she felt it in every fiber of her being. On the eve of the trial, Marina visited the site that would soon be inaugurated as the support center for victims of domestic violence. The building, which once housed Raphael's main office, was being completely renovated. The rooms where cruel decisions were made would be transformed into spaces of welcome and healing. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby's strong kicks. Her child would be born into a different world, a world where the truth had prevailed, where abusers were held accountable for their actions. It was this hope that kept her strong, that made her wake up every morning and continue to fight. The trial was about to begin, and Marina was ready to tell her story, ready to face Raphael one last time, ready to close this painful chapter of her life and begin a new one, free and full of possibilities. The day of the trial dawned with a clear blue sky over London. Marina woke up early, her belly heavy with her nearly full-term pregnancy. Her doctor had authorized her presence in court, but on the condition that she remain seated as much as possible and leave at the first sign of discomfort. Helena stayed by her daughter's side all morning, helping her dress, making sure she was fed and hydrated. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Journalists from all over the country had come to cover the trial, which had become one of the most talked-about cases of the year. Outside, support groups for victims of domestic violence gathered with signs and banners, turning the trial into a larger symbol of the fight for justice. Raphael was brought in handcuffed, escorted by security. He had lost noticeable weight during his months in pre-trial detention, his face more angular, his eyes sunken. But he still maintained that arrogant posture, as if this were all just a temporary inconvenience that would soon be resolved. He did not look at Marina as he entered the room. Judge August Fisher took his seat and began the session. The prosecution would present its case first, and Mr. Marshall rose with a voluminous file of documents. "Your Honor, over the past few months, we have gathered irrefutable evidence of the crimes committed by the defendant, Raphael Rhodes. This is not just about the physical assault we all witnessed in this very courtroom, but about a systematic pattern of abuse, manipulation, fraud, and intimidation that has persisted for years." Marshall methodically presented each piece of evidence, the testimonies of Marina, Danielle, Beatrice, and other former employees were read aloud. The forged documents were displayed and compared with the forensic analyses that proved their adulteration. The recordings from the illegally installed hidden cameras in the residence were described in detail, causing murmurs of outrage from the gallery. The records from the black file, those obtained legally through search warrants, were presented as evidence of the blackmail and coercion scheme. Each witness who took the stand reinforced the picture of a man who had built his empire not through honest work, but through fear, manipulation, and the systematic violation of others' rights. Danielle cried as she recounted the years she spent living in fear of reprisals. Beatrice maintained a firm voice as she described how she had lost years of her life trapped in a toxic relationship. Other employees described the hostile work environment, the veiled threats, the constant feeling of being watched. When it was Marina's turn to testify, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. She stood with difficulty, leaning on the table before walking to the stand. She swore to tell the truth, and then, in a clear, firm voice, began her story. "I married Raphael Rhodes thinking I was building a family, a future. In the first few months he was attentive, affectionate, but slowly I realized that love came with conditions. I had to dress a certain way, speak a certain way, act a certain way. My friends were not welcome. My family was tolerated only on specific occasions. My opinions were constantly devalued." Marina paused, her hands on her belly. "And then came the financial control. I had access to money, but I was monitored. Every purchase, every transaction, he knew. He said it was to protect us, to ensure our financial security, but I realized it was a gilded cage. I had no freedom, no privacy. And when I decided I wanted a divorce, when I finally found the courage to say that this was not what I wanted for my life and for my child, he transformed. The mask fell completely. The threats began. He said he would destroy me, that no one would believe me, that I would lose everything. And he almost made me believe it. Almost." Marina looked directly at Raphael, who for the first time met her gaze. "But then, on that day in this courtroom when he lost control and assaulted me in front of everyone, I understood that I was no longer alone. The truth was there, recorded, witnessed, undeniable, and that gave me the strength to continue." Marina's testimony lasted nearly 2 hours. She answered all of Marshall's questions, then the more aggressive questions from the defense attorney, who tried in vain to discredit or confuse her. Marina remained calm, consistent, honest. When she finally returned to her seat, she was exhausted, but relieved. She had said everything she needed to say. The defense tried to argue that Raphael was a tough but honest businessman, that the accusations were exaggerated, that the assault had been an isolated moment of emotional distress in an extremely stressful situation. Mr. Harrington presented letters of recommendation from businessmen and politicians, trying to paint Raphael as a philanthropist and a generous employer. But every argument rang hollow against the volume of evidence presented by the prosecution. It was during a break in the trial that Raphael made a desperate decision. Without consulting his lawyer, he called a press conference to be held outside the courthouse during the lunch recess. Mr. Harrington tried to dissuade him, but Raphael was determined. It was his last chance to control the narrative, to win back public opinion. When the press conference began, Raphael stood at the center of a small makeshift stage, surrounded by microphones and cameras. He began his speech in a firm voice, denying all accusations, painting himself as the victim of a conspiracy. "I am a hard-working man who built everything from scratch, and now they are trying to take everything from me based on lies and distortions. My ex-wife, manipulated by others, is destroying not only my life but also the company that provides jobs for hundreds of families." The crowd that had gathered was divided. Some nodded in support, others jeered. Raphael continued to speak, his voice growing louder, more defensive. It was then that something unexpected happened. One of the protesters from the domestic violence support group gained access to a large screen that had been set up to broadcast the press conference. In a matter of seconds, the screen showing Raphael's face was replaced by the recording of the assault in the courtroom. The scene was broadcast in slow motion, in high definition, showing every detail of the moment Raphael grabbed Marina and shoved her. The crowd reacted instantly. The jeers grew louder. People shouted accusations. Others began to back away from Raphael. He turned to see the screen, and his expression changed completely. The face that moments before had shown confidence now showed panic. This was not in the script. This was not under his control. Raphael tried to continue speaking, but his voice was drowned out by the shouts. He looked for his lawyer in the confusion, but Mr. Harrington was already walking away, realizing that his association with this client was becoming a professional disaster. It was then that Raphael began to scream, random accusations, empty threats, finally revealing to everyone who he truly was when he could no longer maintain the mask. The police quickly intervened, taking Raphael back inside the courthouse. But the damage was done. The images from the press conference spread across social media in minutes. The man who tried to paint himself as a victim had shown the world his true nature. From a courthouse window, Marina watched it all alongside Helena and Davies. "He's destroying himself," she said softly. "I don't have to do anything. He's doing it all on his own." Helena put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. What he built was power without truth, Marina, and power without truth always crumbles. When the trial resumed after the break, the atmosphere had completely changed. Even Judge August Fisher seemed more somber, more resolute. Raphael's disastrous press conference had eliminated any sympathy that might have remained. The closing arguments were presented. Marshall gave an eloquent speech about justice, about the importance of holding abusers accountable, about the precedent this case would set for future victims of domestic violence and corporate abuse. The defense made a final emotional appeal, but even Mr. Harrington seemed to have lost his conviction. The judge retired to deliberate. 2 hours. Later he returned. The verdict was read in a firm, clear voice. Raphael Rhodes was found guilty of aggravated physical assault, coercion, invasion of privacy, document fraud, psychological abuse, obstruction of justice, and forming an organization for illegal practices. The sum of the sentences resulted in 7 years in prison. Additionally, his assets were frozen until the value of reparations to the victims could be established, and he was banned from holding any executive position in a company for 15 years. Marina felt tears stream down her face. They were not tears of revenge or joy at Raphael's downfall. They were tears of pure and simple relief. Finally, after months of fighting, the truth had prevailed. Raphael was led out of the room in handcuffs. For the first time, he looked at Marina with something that seemed like an acknowledgement of defeat. There were no words, no gestures, just a look that said everything that needed to be said. 2 weeks later, Marina gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Clara because she wanted her daughter to represent light, transparency, truth. Helena was in the delivery room holding her daughter's hand, crying with joy as she saw her granddaughter for the first time. Davies and Marshall sent flowers and messages of congratulations, along with the news that Marcus Andrews had finally been captured trying to flee the country. Raphael's company was completely restructured. A new board of directors took over, committed to ethical and transparent practices. The name was changed to Renew Enterprises, symbolizing a new beginning. The old headquarters building, where Raphael had wielded his tyrannical power for years, was donated to be transformed into the Clara Caldwell Support Center, a tribute to Marina's daughter and the new start she represented. 3 months after Clara's birth, Marina was at the center's inauguration ceremony. She held her daughter in her arms as she spoke to an audience of hundreds, including other victims of domestic violence, activists, officials, and journalists. When I was trapped in that relationship, I thought I was alone. I thought no one would understand me, that no one would believe me. Marina looked down at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. But I discovered that I was never alone. My mother was with me. People like Danielle, like Beatrice, like Captain Davies and Mr. Marshall were with me. And thousands of other women and men who have gone through similar experiences were with me, even if I didn't know it. This center is not just a building. It's a symbol that truth matters, that justice is possible, that we can rebuild our lives even after the worst storms. Here, no victim will be judged. No story will be discredited. No pain will be minimized. Marina paused, looking at Helena, who was in the front row. My mother taught me that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about giving people the chance to start over, to own their own narratives, their own lives. And that's what this center represents, a place where the truth is not silenced, where fear has no power, where every person who enters can leave stronger, more prepared, more hopeful, because the truth when finally seen, sets everyone free. The speech was met with a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Danielle was crying in the audience, as was Beatrice. Davies maintained his professional demeanor, but his eyes shone with emotion. Marshall was taking notes, already thinking about how this model could be replicated in other cities. After the ceremony, as people toured the center's facilities, Marina found a quiet moment in one of the rooms. She looked out the window, seeing the city spread out before her. London, with all its complexity, its challenges, its opportunities. The same city where she had suffered so much was now the city where she was rebuilding her life. Helena entered the room carrying Clara, who had woken up and started to cry. "I think someone's hungry." She handed her granddaughter to Marina, who began to nurse her. "Mom," Marina said softly, "thank you for never giving up on me. Even when I couldn't see a way out, you always believed there was one." Helena kissed the top of her daughter's head. "A mother always knows, my child, and a judge learns that justice can be slow, it can be difficult, but it's always worth fighting for." In the following months, the Clara Caldwell Support Center became a national benchmark. Hundreds of people passed through its doors every month, receiving legal, psychological, and social support. Marina became an unintentional spokesperson for a larger movement, giving interviews, participating in panels, and sharing her story to inspire others. Raphael was serving his sentence. Occasionally, news about him would appear in the papers: failed appeal attempts, altercations in prison, reports that he was finally undergoing mandatory therapy. Marina didn't follow these stories. For her, that chapter was closed. Raphael was part of her past, not her future. A year after the trial, Marina was at home playing with Clara on the living room floor when her phone rang. It was a documentary producer interested in telling her story for a series on justice and resilience. Marina hesitated at first, but after talking with Helena, Danielle, and Beatrice, she decided to accept. Her story could help others. And this time she would be the one to control the narrative. As night fell over London, Marina put Clara to bed, softly singing a lullaby her own mother used to sing to her. She looked at her daughter's angelic face and felt a deep peace wash over her. Clara would grow up in a different world, a world where her mother was a symbol of courage and resistance, not submission. A world where truth had power, where victims had a voice, where justice was possible. Marina left the room and went out to the balcony, watching the city lights. She was alone but not lonely. She was free but not irresponsible. She was at peace but not complacent. The journey had been long and painful, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, more whole. The legacy Raphael had tried to build on fear and control had crumbled. In its place, Marina was building a legacy of truth, courage, and hope, and as she stood there, feeling the night breeze on her face, she knew she had made the right choice. She had fought, she had resisted, she had won. The mark left by a controlling man had been replaced by a legacy of truth, courage, and reconstruction. And Marina, finally the master of her own destiny, was ready for the future that opened before her, bright and full of possibilities.